So just before you start, Penny, I just want to apologise for not recording the last Zoom series that we had. Veronica Kidd very kindly gave up her time to talk about her young son Callum's journey through transition, and quite a few people have asked me for the Offbeat Lens website address and Facebook page. And so I will make sure that I pop those in the chat here today so that people can pick those up. Okay, so yeah, my sincere apologies. Penny, over to you.
Cool. Look, I just thought what we'd do is just give you a brief overview of Lifelinks, because probably I think the majority of you will know what it is we do, and just really open it up for any questions that you might have around youth transitioning out of school. So Lifelinks, of course, is the Disability Needs Assessment Service Coordination who has the contract with Ministry of Health to work with people under the age of 65 who have disabilities. So disabilities can be either intellectual or physical or sensory. Have I covered it? Oh, gosh, I usually rattle it off, and because I'm thinking really hard about what I'm saying now, and it doesn't always come off the tongue as smoothly as it should. But so people who have got an identified disability would be eligible to come into Lifelinks. And what we do from there is that we will meet with the client, their family, and those significant people in their lives, get a picture of that individual, and from that picture hopefully identify what their disability support needs are and how we can support them or refer them on to the appropriate people that can support them. So in a nutshell, that is Lifelinks. Disability can range and impact on people differently. So people who might have say the same disability might have, say, Down syndrome, their disability support needs will not necessarily all be the same. So the picture that we gather from friends, family, whānau, individual, allows us to, I guess, custom make a support package for that individual. So often we will hear of people saying, but my child has got the same diagnosis as that child, but that person's living situation might be quite different, therefore their support package is quite different. So I think it's always important to remember that the process that we follow is around the individual, not generalised. We are restricted on the supports that we are able to allocate because of the contracts that are held with the Ministry of Health. So when we're looking at things like respite, there are limited facilities in the community who that have contracts with the Ministry of Health that we can refer to. So yeah, that always pays to keep that in mind. When I say that we work with people 0 to 65, just because somebody turns 65 when they are with us does not mean that they will be exited from our service. We will continue to work with those people as long as their primary need is around disability and not aging. So, I mean, yes, we work with children. And so for this meeting, the interest clearly is around those who are preparing or transitioning from school. And I just thought the easiest thing to do is to just open it up for any questions, and we will do our best to answer them. I have online with me Kathleen Richards, who is one of our coordinators, and also Ray Williamson, who has many years of experience working in the NASC. He's now currently doing a different role, but you know, when you've got people experience, you might as well tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, join this meeting because you might be able to offer something. So I just think it's probably best if we just open it up for any questions. Anything out there? I think you might have had some, Julie, some prepared questions, perhaps from people who weren't able to attend today.
Yeah, I do. I was just seeing if somebody else wanted to jump in first. So there are several people that unfortunately couldn't make it on this Zoom today, but I've got the following questions. So somebody had asked, if I moved to Enabling Good Lives, can I move back to Lifelinks?
So when we say enabling good lives, we're talking about the enabling good lives approach that is here in Canterbury. And that is geared specifically at school leavers. So we've got people who are preparing to leave school. Enabling Good Lives will have made contact with them, or the school would have forwarded their names through to Enabling Good Lives, and they would have been contacted and the approach would have been discussed with them. In order to be a part of Enabling Good Lives, you do have to be involved with Lifelinks, because we are the ones who are, I guess, coordinating the funding. So Enabling Good Lives, you're aware, the funding comes, there's three parts of the funding. It's Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, and Ministry of Social Development. And in order to allocate that funding, you must come via Lifelinks. So to say whether you're a part of Enabling Good Lives or you're a part of Lifelinks, we are connected. And we, as part of Lifelinks' role, is to I guess, not hold the funding, but we are there to distribute or allocate the funding to appropriate organisations. So it might be that it goes to, and I'm hoping that you were all part of the Enabling Good Lives lunchtime meeting, because they would have talked to you about fund holders, etc. So Lifelinks can direct the funding to the fund holder, or we can direct some of that funding to contracted providers, your traditional providers, such as, if there are personal cares required, that we could refer through to Nurse Maud or Access or Ali's Home Help, or one of the many providers that are there. I'm going to throw it over to Kathleen. Have I missed anything there, Kathleen? You're muted.
And it's taken a while to get my camera up and running, but it's here now. Hi, I'm Kathleen, and I work in the children's team predominantly. So a big thing with young people who are Oars or Oars funded and within the EGL area, because it's not all of Lifelinks area, it's just within the Christchurch area and North Canterbury and so on, is to start early. The schools, I think, are doing a great job sending out information where children are Oars and very high Oars, but to keep in contact with that Lifelinks coordinator, and we can send those referrals through to EGL. One of the questions that came through is, do you have to stay with EGL? The flexibility with an EGL budget is brilliant, and working with the connector is, but some families choose to stop and start because at a period of time they don't need that intense work with a connector, and then things change and they want more intense work. Was that the question? And that I've watched the presentation from Andrew and Tara, and they talked about changing as you need. So you're not setting anything in concrete. They talked about the transition fee, and it's usually in the person's last year of school, but it can be sooner than that if there is something happening. And starting an EGL budget prior to leaving school, which it only has the disability supports in it, it doesn't have your Oars component or the MSD component, is a way to start with that language, really. Yeah. Was that the questions that came through? I don't know, I'm getting myself confused. Yeah.
That's all good. We've just had a question that's come up in the chat box here. Can you explain a brief overview of the type of support for transition over and above what is available generally?
Are you meaning with the transition funding, or there's a one-off transition funding fee that is usually in the last person's year of school if they are Oars or very high Oars funded, and that's about $2,700, and that's for one-off costs. So it's allocated within a 12-month period of your service coordination. Any unused portions of that budget can be added to the next budget, if that's the question.
Okay, I hope that answered that person, but if not, please do let us know.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, I mean, the question, I think there's a wee bit of ambiguity there when you say, do I have to be involved with EGL? So EGL is an approach where there are EGL navigators involved, and I'm not sure whether the question is, do I have to remain involved with an EGL navigator? I mean, that can vary. I mean, that support is there if you need it, and if you want it. But if you think that you actually understand the pathway that you're going down, then perhaps an EGL navigator or connector, I think they're called now, might not be necessarily what you need or what you want. But you can always ask to be re-engaged with a connector.
That sums it up better, Penny.
So Penny, because I think when I was speaking with this family earlier, I think the question was born out of having a good relationship with their NASC. Do they have to switch that relationship, or do they lose that relationship with Lifelinks? How does that work?
So I guess you will never lose the relationship with Lifelinks, because in order to access your Enabling Good Lives personal budget, Lifelinks still has to be involved. So you'll never lose that relationship. And yes, definitely, I mean, some of our children have been with us from a very young age, and the relationship has definitely been built between the coordinator and the family. So there's nothing wrong with having both of us involved, i.e. the coordinator and the connector, or working more alongside, or getting the connector to work more closely with you, because they have the ability to actually come and meet with you and develop your plan and work alongside you. Whereas those of you who have been with Lifelinks will know that often our staff are able to, they'll make contact with you on that annual basis. You can make contact with them as needs change, but we don't, unfortunately, have the time to be able to do the intensive coordination things that a connector might be able to do with families and with the youth.
And then just with regards to transitioning from school, when is it best to connect with Lifelinks in terms of organising a needs assessment for their young adult from leaving school to transitioning outside of school?
So we'll always encourage families to let us know the year. I mean, because we are contracted to provide the outcome plan or needs assessment, as it's been known in the past, every 3 to 5 years. That might not work in that cycle for somebody who's ready to leave school. So if you know that your young person is going to be leaving at the end of the year, then during that final year, make contact with us so that we can complete an up-to-date outcome plan, which hopefully will help us to identify what some of those additional support needs might be for somebody who is going to be leaving school. So very much like Enabling Good Lives. Enabling Good Lives will say, on your last year of school, let's start planning and moving forward. So it's very much along those lines. And those who are under or joining the Enabling Good Lives approach, what we've been doing is what we call a supported self-assessment. So this was a tool that was developed when Enabling Good Lives came about. And so that's the people being able to tell their story, possibly in a different way than our outcome plan enables them to. But for those that are leaving school, generally it's a supported self-assessment that can be completed by the client, the family, their friends, with the support of the Enabling Good Lives connector, or even with the support of Lifelinks. So definitely that last year of school, we understand significant change is going to happen. So let's start planning for that now.
And with that, Penny, is there anything specific that would be helpful, that any information that the parents or young adult could put together prior to that outcome plan meeting? So
I guess the big thing is around, what are your goals and aspirations for that following year? What is it that is going to have a huge impact on you? So we understand that, for some families, they've been able to work while their person is at school. Now, what is that person going to be doing for those 6 hours that they're normally at school, and how do they need to be supported? So I guess if you're able to identify what it is that the youth wants to be doing or needs to be doing and how they need to be supported to do that, that will help with the planning.
I see there's a couple of questions through chat about what the transition funding fee could be used for. Some people choose to update phones, iPads, etc., and especially phones for tracking devices. Other stories I've heard have been about having a support person to help develop those intense skills around public transport and extra work, especially when they're still at school, but after school as well. So they're following through with what's happening at school into the after school, and it's been an intense 6 months of extra. I can give one example that worked really well. Initially, the support worker got on the bus, went with the person and got off the bus. Then they employed a support worker to meet the person and had someone help them get on. So they slowly reduced down, and that was how they could use that 2,700, was just by the way they employed intensive staffing. So the person could use the bus themselves. One of the things that was on the EGL one was the tandem bike to get out and do more exercise, and that was what a transition funding was used for. Yeah. Does that help with that question? Outside of the young people who are not part of EGL, and in that last year, some of the things that people have worked with the school and then with Lifelinks or the coordinator, thinking about what is that support going to look like. And if you've got a young person needing to go to university, it's making contact with the disability service there and thinking about how that works. One family recently then into NASC to Dunedin, so it was all set up when the young man got to university to get that support he needed to manage that structure around his life at university. Yeah, and moved from having mum and dad providing that support to working with the NASC down there, but it was a transition and doing it early while they were still here in Christchurch.
Thank you, Kathleen. Are there any other questions that anybody has at all? Kathleen and Penny, if there were regular questions that had come up for you during young adults transitions, and anything that you felt we could impart on this Zoom, are there any golden nuggets in there that you feel would be helpful for the young adults and their families?
It's working with the school, and then that transferring into that next year of school. So all schools will have someone who's responsible for employment opportunities, volunteering, that transition to work experience. And it's just really engaging in how that can happen for your young person. Yeah. It's really important. Yeah.
Does anybody else have any other questions at all? Just a question come up in the chat here. Once the one-off funding finishes, what could funding look like moving forward?
The transition funding is just one part of the overall funding for an EGL budget. So an EGL budget, while you're still at school, is made up of your disability supports that you would have had and that often grow with a child. So that can include home support, personal care, household management, respite. So that's your EGL budget. And then the transition funding would go into there. So you've got your disability supports. When that young person leaves school, your ORS portion goes in there. If you're under 21, it's comes through from the Ministry of Education. If you're over 21, it's part of MSD. So that provides that vocational support, I suppose. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess the important part to remember is that, you know, if there are disability support needs, then, you know, there should always be a pathway to get those support needs met.
Thank you. Is there any other questions at all?
So I would just encourage, if there are any queries, talk to your coordinator, or if there's a connector involved, talk to your connector, you know, and we'll all working together really to make sure that the support needs of a young person moving forward can be met.
Yeah.
And the connectors and the coordinators, the CCs, aren't we almost, work quite closely together. So if I've contacted a family who's part of EGL, I always say to them, I'll let Tara know that this is what we've discussed, or Tara might send me a question about something that's happening. And so we work closely together. Yeah.
Okay. I did speak with you about this earlier, Penny, and I think the answer is that there's no answer, but just to clarify for people, there's a lot of people starting to ask about the Ministry of Disabled People / whatever the ministry is going to be called. But are there any insights into that at all? Is there any knowledge around what that might mean for relationships with Enabling Good Lives, Lifelinks, or any part of the system that somebody's working with?
So we have been given no more information than the general public have been given, really. All we know, you know, that we are very clear on, it's the principles of enabling good lives is what needs to happen in the sector moving forward. So that's just not within Lifelinks, but that generally is, let's just say, the whole of New Zealand. The principles of enabling good lives is so that people can have a good life, and that's, you know, it's individualized, it's accessible, it's, you know, all those sorts of things. So it's not, other than that, we haven't been told anything else. We know that there is a new ministry being developed, and I've heard it several times that just because we're rebranding doesn't mean that we can't change, and definitely things need to be changing moving forward, but we just don't know at this stage how that is going to happen.
Yeah, okay. Is there any other questions at all? Okay, if not, I just want to thank you, Kathleen and Penny from Lifelinks, so much for giving up your time today and allowing us to record the session so that we can share this with others. Are you okay if I haven't covered the questions for the parents clearly enough? Can I just reach out to you and ask questions?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Awesome, thank you. I didn't introduce myself at the beginning, but my name's Julie Powerfast. I work for the Disabled Persons Centre Trust, and we provide unbiased information to individuals to connect them back to their communities as well as other services. But thank you all so much for coming along and joining us today. Next week, Wednesday at 12 noon, we've got the Ministry of Social Development. So I look forward to seeing you all then. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye.